So we are looking at what I consider kind of to be the base of the three high safety defense. Now there are a few different fronts that I'll kind of show, but for me, this is what I would really consider the base of a three high safety defense. You can see we've got three safeties above what offense generally considers like the hard deck. And then we also, for this front, only have a 4-man box. Now, in order to be able to beat something, we have to be able to understand it. And Iowa State really made this defense famous 5 or 6 years ago now. And it was primarily developed to stop RPOs. So we'll get into some front mechanics. We'll get into some different coverages that can be run out of it. But generally, the idea for this defense is to take away every available blade of grass. So for this front, how it would generally be played is that the 4 front defenders, our middle linebacker and 3 down linemen, they're going to take away the 4 interior gaps. Generally, we have our 2 4 eyes that are going to play the B gaps. The nose would oftentimes play a lag technique and play the backside of the center's block. Say, for instance, we're running inside zone to the right here, and then the mic would fit the open A gap. So there are 4 interior gaps, 2 A's and 2 B's. They would be taken care of by the front 4. And the reasoning for this is the defense obviously has tons of extra players on the perimeter. So the defense wants to make the ball roll off the table to where it has extra help that can come. Now, from this alignment specifically, defenses have what I call trigger rules, and that really is what outside linebacker is fitting and which outside linebacker is not. And the way that's determined is by which apex defender, which outside linebacker is on the same side as the running back. So here the Sam is on the same side as the running back. So what this defense would want to do is take him out of the run fit. He's not responsible for a gap because he is the RPO player. They wanted to take him out of conflict. RPOs, run pass options. We want to find the conflict defender and make him wrong. Well, the defense would make him right by just not making him part of the run fit. Now, on the other side, the Will does not have the running back on his side, so he would be the play side C gap defender. So who then is responsible for the backside C gap? And that's where the middle safety comes into play. So generally, he's going to stack the running back. He's going to stay in phase with him. And then if the ball cuts back, he's going to fall back with it and meet him in that open gap backside. So out of this 10 personnel set, the defense, even though they only have 4 defenders in the box, they have all 6 gaps covered. So a lot of offenses, especially thinking 5 or 6 years ago, they would make calls just based on the box. Generally, if there were 7 in the box, you would throw. If there were 6 in the box, then you were even. If you read 1, if there was 5, then you were going to check to a run. Well, now there's only 4. So the defense by their front is essentially begging you to run the ball. But the way the run is fit up is not like there's only the 4 defenders. They're clogging the interior gaps, forcing the ball to hit the perimeter where there's help available. Now, something else this did was it really hurt zone read, because by alignment right here, there is no C gap defender. So if you want to get a first level read, the backside tackle has to arc and you've got to read the 4-eye. Now, one of the things this defense really preys on is offensive linemen not looking outside of the box. But if we're running inside zone read to the right, we should have a double combo on the 4-eye to the Will here and an A combo on the nose to the Mike. We're reading the defensive end, and it looks like we're all accounted for in the box. But here, what the defensive end could do is he could still chase the running back. The jack is also the quarterback player as that backside C-gap defender. And even if you do block the Sam here, I really don't like the extended triple option with the backside tackle arc. But even if you try and do that, the defense still has a pitch player, generally going to be the corner here, because we'll talk about coverages in a little bit, but cover 2 variations are really popular out of this front. So the defense still has its dive player, still has its quarterback player, and technically the Sam is the pitch player here, and then the corner should be kind of replacing as a crack replace as a secondary pitch defender. So again, by alignment, it looks like you've got the box, but they take the air out of it really quickly. Now, I mentioned coverages and cover 2 specifically, and you can see by alignment, the defense is 3/2 to both sides. So the outside safeties are going to play the deep half. The corners are the flat defenders. Generally, they're going to be responsible for number 1 vertical. Outside linebackers would be the hook defenders. They're going to be responsible for number 2 vertical. And then as far as the pass rush goes, the 4 eyes are going to get a pass read and they're going to work outside to contain. The nose generally going to go to the halfback, try and occupy the center and the guard. And then the mic really kind of depended on the quarterback. So if it was a mobile quarterback, sometimes he would just kind of come up here and wait for the quarterback to try and break the pocket. Other times he could add late as the 4th man in the rush, so they can still get a normal pressure. Now the jack right here doesn't look like he has any responsibility in cover 2. He would be the player responsible for number 3 vertical. Now this would really be Tampa 2 if we're looking at a specific variation of cover 2. But because number 3 is the halfback here, he would probably have some sort of push alert with the Sam, to where, let's say the running back runs a flat route, then the Sam can push to the flat with the running back, and the jack can then become responsible for the vertical of number 2. Now that's not the only coverage that can be run. The way that this defense is lined up, you can really get to anything, but that's what I would consider the base coverage for the 3 high safety defense, especially with this 3-1 box. Now, if that seemed a little bit familiar, that's because this is essentially just the tight front. If we were to move the mic over to a 30 and bring the jack safety down to be a jack linebacker in a 30, that's all this is. The gaps still come out to be the same, and the defense still has their 3/2 in terms of coverage to both sides. So a lot of things that we can do to beat the tight front apply if this is the variation of 3 high safety defense you're seeing. Now, this is another variation of it that I've seen front-wise, and now we have 5 defenders in the box, but the defense has lost its backside apex player, at least by alignment. Now, the way that that would be made up for is the Sam and the jack have essentially switched responsibilities, just they're playing at different depth. So here we have our front. It's the same for the mic and the 3 down linemen. Now it would be the Sam that's responsible for the C gap. Will still has his trigger rule. He's opposite the back. And now the jack kind of becomes that RPO player on the backside. As far as coverage goes here, probably looking at some version of cover 6, where I would say the strong safety probably playing the quarter here, the jack playing the quarter there, and then your corner would then be your flat player, and you can play your cover 2 away from that. Sam's on the same side of the running back, so he'd probably be the one in coverage in case you get a fast flat route. And then you still have the 4-man rush off of it. Last front variation that we'll take a look at before we get into how to beat it, and it is possible even with 3 high safeties to get to 4 down defense. So here the Sam has come up to be on the ball. The mic is the only linebacker in the box. It's a 4-1. The defensive end here would probably be playing some sort of heavy technique, where if the right tackle squares up on him at all, he's going to knife into the B gap. That's just so they can try and force just as much as they can that ball to get off the table to the will on the other side. The rest of the gaps just have everybody in them. Sam's got the C, tackle's got the B, nose has the opposite A, and Mike's fitting the open A gap in between. Backside, you still have your jack coming down to be that RPO, that quarterback player, and the coverages that we just talked about. So thinking about how to beat this defense, and really just any defense in general, to me, is what is this defense trying to do, and how can I not let them do that? So against this formation, the defense is trying to defend every blade of grass, make you think you have space that you don't in the run game, and then by alignment, take away a lot of the pass game and the RPOs with it. And something else this defense preys on that I mentioned earlier is the offensive line not seeing outside of this box. So step 1 is to train the offensive line to think outside the box. And against this variation of it, it shouldn't be that difficult because there's 4 of them and there's 5 of us. Now, for some, that might mean we're going to get a full 2-on-1 and nobody's got to worry about coming off for a linebacker. But even if it's only 4-on-5, it's still 11-on-11. So if you're taking 2-on-1, yes, you might take that one all the way back to the parking lot, but there's still somebody now that's unaccounted for. So always have some linemen coming off on some linebacker. But we got to get offensive linemen thinking outside of the box against these fronts. And that comes with identifying who the extra fitters are and how can we account for them. Now, we looked at run fits earlier. We had the Will coming off one edge and the jack coming backside to take care of the other. The defense really preys on not accounting for him. Now, they really like it when you don't account for the will outside the box either, but we're generally used to accounting for outside linebackers. We are not used to accounting for safeties. And that's really where I showed that this is really just the tight front, just with a slightly different alignment. Now, I have actually faced three high defense in the past where the Mike was kind of that backside player and they would fit the Jack on the front side. We saw it in some film, and all I told the offensive line to do was just treat that middle safety like he's the play side linebacker. So even if he's not there by alignment, he is operating as the play side linebacker, and we need to block him as such. So that's what this defense is expecting of the opposing offense. But what are some things that we as an offense can do? Number one, we can mess with their run fits. Offenses think that staying 10 personnel is really the best way to make defenses defend every blade of grass. Well, this defense by alignment is really good at defending every blade of grass. So if they're really good at that, just by alignment, then the offense needs to pivot. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, in my opinion, that the defense is dictating to the offense. It's just I need to find a different lever to pull to where now I'm forcing the defense into a box that they don't want to be in. So this defense wants to stay spread out. What can we do to force them to have to add numbers to the box? Step number one would definitely be to bring that tight end in. Now for the defense, that may be a pretty simple adjustment. They might just bring this will outside, just like an outside linebacker in the tight front would. Now let's say you're in the middle of the field and you're this free safety. Number two and number one aren't very close anymore. And there's nobody in a position to really wall number two closer to you if you're still wanting to play cover two. This also changes the run fit because now we have an open gap. Previously, the will was playing the C gap. Now, if he's outside shade on the tight end, he really has to play the D gap. If a defense were to try and knife him into the C gap, if we got some kind of a reach, then it would just be way too easy for the tight end to fake a reach and leak out into the flat, and there's nobody there. So if the defense still wants to keep the Sam out of the run fit for the RPO, then the Jack really has to play this backside C gap. Now that brings the free safety to a position where he has to fit the play side C gap. Otherwise, they're not sound. So what do you get now? Some form of one-on-one on the Z with the corner. Let's take it a step further. Now we're in 21 personnel. Now at this point, a lot of teams are going to get out of three high safeties. You've got 7 blockers in the box. There's potential to read somebody, so you've got the potential to account for 8 defenders, and you have the ability with a 2-back run game to get downhill quick. So even though they might be able to close space quick, realistically, the running back is probably meeting one of these safeties 3 yards in the hole with the full head of steam. You're going to be able to stay on schedule if nothing else. So at this point, a lot of teams are going to get out of it. Maybe some of these safeties roll down, and then the easy adjustment for the defense then is to play a 5-man rush with 3 under 3 deep coverage behind it. Corners bail to play the third. Jack is your deep third. The outside safeties play the flats. Your Mike is your middle hook, and then you have your 5-man rush up front. But now the offense is dictating to the defense. You know what's coming because this isn't what they want to do. This isn't their base defense, so they probably don't have a ton in the package outside of it. All right, so here we're in 10 personnel trips. And if you go back and look at 2x2, this version of the 3 high defense is 100% balanced. So like we talked about in one of these past episodes is when a defense is balanced, we want to find different ways to unbalance them. And while we don't normally think of it as unbalanced, trips is a variation of unbalanced, or maybe you would consider it an overload. We're putting an extra player to one side and it should force the defense to change their alignment. Now, it's not a super hard adjustment, but it is an adjustment, and that's what we have to think about is what can we do to make the other defense do something they don't want to do? What can we do to make them communicate right before the play with motion or shifts? What can we do to force them into a box as far as their playbook goes when it comes to different formations like we just looked at? What are some things we can do to make them uncomfortable? So here we're looking up with the run fit. Since the will doesn't have a number 2 extended to his side, he gets to bump the mic over, and now we have a 3-2 box. 4 eyes are still going to take the B gaps. Nose is still going to take the backside A gap. The will is now responsible for the C gap. Again, he's not the RPO player backside. There is no number 2, so he gets to just be a straight run fitter. Mike has the opposite A gap. Sam on the other side still has his trigger rule. He's the outside linebacker opposite the back, so he's going to play the C gap. Now, just because there's no number 2 detached doesn't mean that there isn't a need for a quarterback player. For a sound defense, that should now be the free safety, assuming they're playing some version of quarters on the backside. If it's quarters, it's the free safety. If it's cover 2, cloud, it would be the corner. But you only need one option player because with no number 2 receiver, there is no triple option threat. So just need a quarterback. I mean, theoretically, you could treat the X as a pitch player, but with the corner pressed right on top of him, probably not a good idea. Now, things change when the running back hits the other side. Why? Because now the Sam has to be the RPO player because he's the outside linebacker to the side of the back. There is a threat of an RPO. There is a threat of triple option, so he is no longer in the run fit. So again, now we're forcing safeties into the run fit. This free safety has to now be the force player coming from depth. And if you've followed me for very long, you know that one of my favorite ways to pick on them is with a glance. So here, let's say we're going to run outside zone just to make sure we're really threatening the force integrity of that free safety. As long as the backside tackle can take care of the 4-eye on his own and cut him off, you're 5 for 5 in the box, and we can read that 6th defender. If the free safety comes up to force the run, which he has to, then the glance window is open. If he stays deep, at least until the ball is handed off, the running back maybe is one cut away from making a miss, or we should at least still get enough yardage to stay on schedule. Now, that's not to say that we couldn't run an RPO with the running back on the weak side. Who's the C-gap defender with the running back opposite here? It would be the Sam. So he would be the guy that we would want to read on an RPO. So what can we do? We can run a smoke screen to the Z, still run that same outside zone, and now we're reading the Sam. If he comes to fit the C-gap, then the quarterback just turns and throws it to the Z. If the Sam stays in place, then we should at least get a couple yards. Another benefit of the 3 high safety defense here is how it covers trips if we're looking at pass coverage. A lot of teams don't like playing cover 2 to trips because the middle hook player is responsible for the vertical of number 3. So the Y is number 3 right here. But now you've got a defensive back who is that middle hook player. So one reason that teams might play a 3 high safety defense is because they don't have to worry about trips checks as far as the coverage goes. Yes, there's probably a boss call or something, backers over strong side to push the Mike and the Sam, a gap over when that will doesn't have a number 2 receiver extended. But I think that's quite a bit easier than having to completely change the coverage, especially when you factor in motion from 2x2 to 3x1 or vice versa. Theoretically, you don't even have to change the coverage if you're in the 3 high safety system. So just kind of a reminder of where we're at before we get into some more specific plays is number 1, we need to make sure we're accounting for all run fitters. Now, accounting for doesn't necessarily mean blocking. There can be some reads involved, as we talked about. I really like the play side RPOs that really prey on those trigger rules. But we need to know who is going to fit the run. Where is that middle safety going to fit, especially if we're 2x2? Is he going to come off the front side or is he going to come off the back side? Is the defense actually going to play with those outside linebacker trigger rules, or are they both crashing the run? And then now maybe we do have an RPO open backside. So it's really important in our scouting that we make sure we know exactly how the run's being fit up. Again, we played that team in the spring a couple years ago, and that middle safety was playing as the play side linebacker. If I remember right, they were pushing the nose to the play side A gap. He wasn't lagging back. They were pushing him to the play side A gap. The Mike was playing the backside A gap. And then that middle safety was coming down to play the play side C gap. So all I had to do, tell the offensive line, hey, he's the play side linebacker, ID the front that way, and we didn't have any trouble. So we got to make sure we know who is fitting and where they're fitting from. Second thing we can do is formations. Part A, get big. They're trying to take away the space outside the box. So what do we need to do? Make space inside the box. Force them to play where they don't want to, which is inside the box. Bring in a tight end, bring in a fullback, bring both of them in, maybe bring in 2 tight ends. Make those safeties that want to play deep fit the run. I've seen a couple 3 high defenses and they all played from 8, 9, or 10 yards deep. It's hard to fit the C gap from that deep and not allow at least 4 yards with a running back with a full head of steam. A lot of teams are using defensive backs as that middle safety. So forcing him into the run fit, and then now we get to maybe block him with a tight end, or we get to block him with a fullback and we've got 50 pounds on him. He doesn't want to play in the box. Make them play where they don't want to. And that kind of leads into part 2 of formations. If it's a balanced defense, we need to find a way to unbalance it. And that can be something as simple as trips. We'll look at tight end trips here in just a minute. But making sure that we know who's going to be fitting the run and that we can take care of them, and then making them play somewhere that they don't want to, whether it's in the box or whether they've got to adjust to an unbalanced formation of some kind. Now the offense is back in charge. And since we are, let's take a look at some plays that I really like against these fronts. The tight end trips really puts a strain on this defense. We've got the linebackers bossed because the Will doesn't have that number 2, but the Sam kind of has a confusing read here. Yes, he's got twins. Does he apex? Or do they leave the gap completely open? We're going to assume that this defense wants to stay 3 high completely, but something that could be done is maybe the jack comes to fill in, and then now again we're dictating to the defense, you're not staying 3 high, you're playing something that's not your base. But for argument's sake here, we can look at just a base way that's sound that a defense could play this, and I've got the Sam in a 9 technique outside the tight end here. Now, essentially, coverage-wise here, we can assume maybe some kind of banjo for the 2 detached receivers. Maybe the jack has the tight end up and out, and the Mike has him in, and then the defense still has their 2-over-1 concepts backside. But looking at running the ball here, I like outside zone. Got a tight end for the 9, got a double to the Mike, an A combo to the Will, and what I would do here, arc the backside tackle for the free safety because there's no middle safety here that's going to fit on the backside C gap because we don't have that number 2 receiver. As far as the play side receivers go, they're responsible for the off-ball defender inside of them. Always want to force the corner to tackle unless we have an extra man on that side. Then the X has the cornerback side. So just we draw up our run action here. And even with this 9 technique on the ball, we can still do that. If he's playing out here in space and we have the outside gap and the next inside gap open, then this should be an even bigger play. Now, a play that I have really recently started liking kind of off of outside zone or to the same surfaces as outside zone is long trap. So generally trap, you're going to trap the 3 technique. Long trap goes to the edge player. So again, we would need a backside tackle that can cut off a 4-eye. That's another thing that these defenses prey on, is that they have better defensive linemen than you have offensive linemen. So footwork and getting to the spot is key. We got to cut off that backside 4-eye. We can double team the nose to the Will, down block on the 4-eye, tight end up to the tackle, and we are 6 for 6 in the box on the long trap. And something we can do here is we can really prey on this jack. He's the only other player right now who's in any position to tackle this run anytime soon. And if he's responsible for the vertical of number 3, remember number 3 here is the Y. So if he sees that tight end block, then he should be fitting to be the unblocked player, the extra fitter. Now we could block him with the F like we did on the last play, or we can read him and run an RPO. We could run a smoke screen. We could run a bubble screen. Generally, the Z is going to be my best receiver. So I would go smoke screen here. And again, if you followed me on the channel, you know one of my offensive philosophies is finding that one-on-one matchup. Right now, we are 6 for 6 in the box with the smoke screen. We are 2 for 2 on the perimeter. The jack is the guy that we can't block, so we've got to read him. He's the one who's going to decide whether we can run the ball, whether we can pass the ball. We can figure it out post-snap with this read. Maybe you're not a huge fan of long trap, though, or you don't want to put it in your offense. You can also run GT counter here. It's a little bit risky with the backside 4-eye because we're going to have the center go all the way back to the 4-eye. Right guard on the nose, right tackle on the 3. Tight end is going to be going all the way back to the Will. So then we're going to have the guard kick the Sam, tackle, wrap for the Mike. So we're 6 for 6 in the box. I generally don't like to RPO off of GT counter, especially with this back block by the center. That end is going to be about here before he actually gets blocked, and the center really just has to worry about washing him down. Well, that can get you right into the lap of the quarterback if we're not careful. So we really just need to make sure that ball is handed off, and by the time the defensive end gets back here, the ball's already on the front side. Now, why not read it then if we're not going to RPO it? If we were going to read it, theoretically, we could get a double team on the nose, We could block down on the tackle. Tight end could handle the mic. And then now we are wrapping to the middle safety, the jack. So if he fits the run like he's supposed to and he sees number 3 block, then we still actually have him accounted for because we are not blocking somebody in the front. But this run is problematic for 2 reasons. Number 1, we're not getting any hands on the defensive end. So it's not impossible with the last play where we're blocking back on him, but it's even more probable here is this 4-eye can sometimes actually stop the wrap from happening. He can sometimes be so quick that he actually gets in that B gap in between. Okay, so why is that a problem then if we're reading him? If that just happens, then the quarterback should pull the ball. Okay, well, the defense here has a quarterback player that the offense can't account for. Maybe the X can go crack him, but then the corner is still there. It's 2 over 1 on the backside, and there's no way now for the offense to equate the numbers because there's no pitch guy. Even if we were to bring somebody in motion to play the pitch, Jack's just going to follow him, and then now he's the quarterback player, and the free safety or the corner are the pitch players. So I like GT counter. I wouldn't read it for a read option or an RPO. I'd just run it. But all of those are strong side runs. What about running to the weak side? There are some issues here with running any gap plays to the weak side. The reason being is that we can't really get to the backside linebacker. Now, personally, I don't like offensive linemen having to go around defensive linemen to get to their blocks. Now, what I mean by that is theoretically, the defensive end here could get around the 4-eye and get back to the backside linebacker if we were going to run counter again. I just personally don't like those mechanics. What I prefer to do is if he's not going to block down on this 4-eye, then I'd prefer for him to block the C-gap player, which would be the free safety. Problem now is if we're going to block back on this 4-eye, we don't have anybody for the mic. That can kind of be equated here if we were to maybe read this backside 4-eye and we can double the nose back to the mic. Again, we're running counter. We can kick the 4-eye, wrap to the will, and then we could either block the Sam with the Y or we could put him on a flat route and then triple option this thing. Either way, he's accounting for the Sam. The issue here is an easy position for a scrape exchange by the defense. So the tackle just chases down the running back, no regard for the quarterback. And then the mic, if they've got a good linebacker that can recognize a double pull, then he stays home and fills that backside alley to be the quarterback player. And while on paper we have him accounted for, in execution, he's not actually scraping over the top where he would need to be blocked. If we've got a good tight end, something we can do here is we can block back and then try and get the tight end up to cut off the mic, guard, kick, and tackle wrap. I wouldn't actually read this. I would just have the quarterback boot out of it to try and hold that Sam. But again, we've got to have a tight end here that can get up to and cut off a mic who's already shaded inside of him. So that just makes this play really difficult. Again, with that caveat of if we have a backside tackle who can handle the 4-eye and cut him off, then a play that I think that works really well against this front is power read. But if our play side tackle's got somebody inside of him who we're actually reading, well, it's that same thing we just talked about. We can arc him to the C-gap defender being the free safety, read the 4-eye here, and then we get to get our double on the nose, guard wrapping for the will. Tight end here can just stay on the Sam, and then we have our power read with everybody blocked on the play side. We've already talked about it, but I do want to just mention again, we could run outside zone and force this free safety to either fit the run or stay home for the glance. We talked about it out of 10 personnel trips, but the same concept does still apply here. But this is definitely a formation that I would get into if I wanted to be 11 personnel against the 3 high safety defense. The offense is really dictating alignment to the defense here. There's a couple different ways that defenses on paper can play it, but each individual defense is probably going to have 1, maybe 2 different ways. Now looking at the pass game, going to be really hard to pass on this defense, not just in this formation, but out of any formation, just because of the amount of space that they are taking outside the box. So again, remember the premise of this defense, they want to take away the pass by alignment, and then they want to force the ball off the table whenever it's run to the guys they have on the perimeter. So what we need to understand, especially with these 3 high safeties, is it's going to be extremely hard to hit anything down the field in terms of a drop back passing game. So one of the pass plays that I'd really like against a 3 high defense would be mesh. Because again, the jack is waiting for 3 vertical. If 3 doesn't go vertical, he's playing technically a middle hook, but that middle hook is going to end up being 12, 15 yards deep. Outside safeties, again, they're playing the deep half generally. So who is actually going to follow this X whenever he runs the shallow route? If anybody, it's the corner, and he's going to have bad position. So the X can run the low shallow, the Y can run the high shallow here, and then the halfback can insert into the protection. Late in the down, he can come and be that outlet pass. And on the front side, we can have the Z and the F do a ton of different things. The defense is playing what amounts to be middle field open coverage, so we can run middle field open beaters. We can run dagger, clear out the strong safety, bring the Z in underneath him, the cornerback staying outside. Depending on where this jack is at, the jack should be pretty close to the core of the formation, at least in terms of his horizontal alignment, because of where the tight end is. So he's probably somewhere between the middle of the field and the near hash mark. If this crease is occurring on the opposite hash, he might not be able to make a play there. Best one, though, in my opinion, probably at least in terms of structure, would be fade out. Going to be really hard if we're thinking about just a normal, like throwing an out to the field in trips. Not an easy throw, but it would depend on who that strong safety is if we think he can make a play on it or not. But if this corner's hanging on number 1 and that strong safety is getting over the top, then there's not going to be anybody here for the F. If we really want to play on the defense's rules, maybe we don't use the Y in the mesh. Maybe he runs the clear out on dagger. Then now maybe we get the F on the dig route and the Z setting the mesh for the X. Same situation here for the corners. Do we really think this corner is going to follow the Z? And if the F's pushing vertical and the Y's pushing vertical, do we really think that the strong safety or the jack are going to come down and play the Z? Probably not. So they're clearing them out, probably going to get some kind of window right here. And if we don't, it's because the mic has probably backed off, and then now we have room for the mesh underneath. Last one here that I really like out of trips, I call it Dusty. Some people call these fin routes 5 and in, and then the tight end is going to run a corner. I really like this one because with how deep that strong safety is going to be playing, this is open basically right now. And again, they're trying to cap verticals, so probably not going to get much resistance to throwing these. They're breaking in as opposed to out on the fade out, so it's not as hard of a throw. Maybe the Sam hops off and plays that window and they still get their 4-man rush with the Mike or the Will. But even then, you've got the Z coming too. Maybe the defense messes up. The strong safety sees the F go in and he takes him. The corner goes with the Z. And now the jack probably has inside leverage on the corner, which is not where you want to be when you're trying to defend that. So keys to attacking the 3 high safety defense. Number 1, we have to know who to account for. They are lightening the box, but that's not going to stay that way. Who are they bringing post snap to impact the run fit? Number 2, formations. Part 1 of that, we can get heavier, force them to play in places that they don't want to play by bringing extra defenders in the box. It's a defense that's meant to take away space to the perimeter, to the deeper parts of the field. So don't worry about those. Force them to play where they don't want to play. Make them get in the box. Make those DBs fit the run aggressively if they want to stay 3 high. And if they get out of 3 high, well then now they're not in their base defense. So we are again dictating to the defense what they are going to do. Part 2 of formations is unbalance them. It's a balanced defense. Go back to the beginning of the video, look at the alignments to 2x2, and it's perfectly balanced. When defenses are balanced, we want to unbalance them, and vice versa. When defenses are unbalanced, we want to force them to play balanced. It's a balanced defense. Make them uncomfortable by unbalancing them, getting heavier, bringing a tight end, bringing a fullback, and some unbalanced, and we will be telling the defense how they're going to play, which means we can tell them how we're going to beat them. And then number 3, we can't get greedy. This defense is about taking away the deeper parts of the field. They're putting an extra defender deep. Even in the pass game, it's going to be lots of 4, 5, and 6 yard gains. That's just what happens when there are so many people playing 7 yards past the line of scrimmage. And one of the benefits of this defense is that if you're just playing a normal kind of cover 2, it can really adapt to just about any formation. You don't have to worry about checking out of it because you have that middle safety who is capable of carrying number 3 vertical because it's probably a defensive back. So don't try and beat him deep. Find plays that win underneath, hitches, mesh, put somebody on a go to clear out those deep defenders, force whoever's left in the box to play coverage and flood the underneath coverage for consistent, quick gains and move the ball down the field. Maybe send the number 2 or number 3 receiver on a clear out route to take out at least one of the safeties, maybe a linebacker too. Make sure the shallow to intermediate passing area is open and take those 5, 6, 7 yard gains down the field to the end zone. Now I mentioned that this front can really end up playing out a lot like the tight front. And if you want to go more in depth with some of the things that I like against that front, you can click on the screen and watch the next video.